is complicated, and that's why I will be trying to, to kind of a little walk with you through thoughts which are behind the way a new discussion is taking shape in Europe around culture. This is divided in chapters, as it was a book, so I hope it make it easier to follow, though it's not easy. Be prepared. This is a delay. Okay. First, we need to shift from policy view to a politics view, meaning that in order to do effective policy, we need to understand where we are in space and time. And if we keep looking at things that concern us only within a narrow spectrum of then we might miss some important things and reduce our capacity to impact. So let's have a look at needs of today.
Is poor and sick, and up here is rich and healthy. Now, I'm going to show you the world 200 years ago, in 1810. Here come all the countries. Europe brown, Asia red, Middle East green, Africa south of Sahara blue, and the Americas yellow. And the size of the country bubble showed the size of the population. And in 1810, it was pretty crowded down there, wasn't it? All countries were sick and poor. Life expectancy were below 40 in all countries. And only the UK and the Netherlands were slightly better off, but not much. And now, why start the world? Despite the enormous disparities today, we have seen 200 years of remarkable progress. That huge historical gap between the West and the rest is now closing. We have become an entirely new converging world.
But this is demography. This is also demography. Left side was the structure of the population in Europe in 1950, when we invented something that was called welfare. And that welfare, which is basically the idea that we can reduce inequality by enabling people with less means to access to protections and empowerment, culture, education. It was based on that demographic structure where the majority of people contributed to the growth of the economy because there was a majority of the population which was in working age and was, being long period of full employment. This is the Europe, but it would be the world on the right-hand side, where the proportion of the producer now is so that the producer are less than the one onto which should be redistributed what is product. That means that we have to give up to welfare? I don't think so, but we need to take into account these things because things is huge, is massive, and imagine just to have understanding, when we talk about pensions today, we normally do it with the people that already are building pensions. And we don't do it with the people that won't have pensions. So how the system will work with this new condition? Then there's another condition which is quite interesting, which affects the Western world. I asked in the past some friends at the OECD to backtrack trade from the 16th century. They gave me data, it was impossible to show it in a visible way. Then I found on the website this image which tells you the story. That's the story. It's that more or less. This was, if you take this, the West, and this was the rest of the world, this was the proportion of the global trade between the West part of the world and the rest of the world from 16th century. And it went along this way more or less until 2000, whatever. This is the new world. The world where the center of the world has moved eastward. this is an implication. The implication is this part of the world is no longer one that decides what the rest of the world does. And this is also related to the population, because only 1/9 of the global population would be in the Western countries, while the rest would be in Asia, I mean not Russia, I mean Asia, China, India, and so on, and Africa. Again, this modifies substantially the condition that this part of the world had to deal with to build its own wealth, because it built the wealth on a geopolitical dominance. This geopolitical dominance exists no longer, which by my point of view is a good thing. But no, we need to take into account, because it's not exactly the same situation before. Then there's a third element. That's a map, the one with the dots. And it's mapping the 1,300 transnational corporations which control 70% of the global blue chip. And it maps the connection through shareholders. And these people have been mapping these things, it dates back to 5-6 years ago. They find out that in the core of these 1,300 organizations, which control a big part of world trade, there are 147 which are so neat that seem to be capable to control each other. In the first 50 of these 147, there's only one non-financial company, which is China Petrochemical. All the rest are Barclays, Unicredit, just name it. What that means, they are not plotting, they are not building a strategy together, they compete. But they all compete against the role of states. Because the reduction of the regulations is an advantage for this group of people for their own objectives, which is making money. And this is something that on with large you should read be attached to the sovereign state debt, because it's a way to reduce the capacity of the states to deliver welfare and transfer what we call welfare to for-profit, education, security, culture, name it. Again, I'm not saying that they are plotting, but there is an interest there. So these are three big conditions which affects Europe, and especially Europe at level of national states, because we are fragmented, we are not yet European, that are basically changing the space in which we are living. I'm not considering here the environmental component, because this is not peculiar of Europe, of Western. This is a global, and it's an even bigger challenge. So, then, this is a quite interesting graph, which was released by the London School of Economics. That up there, 12%, was the income in UK owned by 1% of the population in 1930s. Then it dropped down to this amount in the midst of the 70s, and then in 2000 was again there. And if you look at inequality situation across the world, you see this. And just, I tell it now because I go back on this, between 70s and 2000, we had economic growth. Remember that. So, we are going towards the direction where inequality is growing. So even the way that we build welfare to mitigate inequality generated by wild capitalism is not in achieving the results. This is not a crisis for us. It is a transition, meaning transition that we are no longer in the condition we were before, and therefore we need to understand where we go with this part of the world, because conditions on which we have based 500-year history are no longer there. And if you look at this period in this way, you see the challenges, but you may also see the potential. Because in the transition mentality, what you are trying to do is simply to restore the condition that pre-existed the crisis in order to solve the crisis. The real truth is that you cannot restore that condition. And if you cannot restore that condition, you need to find what are the assets that you have in order to go ahead and where you want to go. it's not surprising that people's satisfaction in life is dropping down everywhere, except not in a few countries. And surprisingly, it was dropping down less in Eastern countries because the political condition was worse, or there was hope. But now it's going down also in Eastern countries, in this part of the world. And there are quite interesting things. Then we see an incredible connection between the perception of satisfaction in life and the trust in the authorities, in the government, in the quality of the government. These are Gallup studies, which are quite reliable. And you may see there that my country is quite down, Serbia is down, Bosnia is down, Lithuania is down, Bulgaria is down, and you go up. Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland. Is that surprising? It's not surprising. What is important is that people perceive their life better if they think that their government are doing good. And another important element is this one. Is that we see that one of the major conditions for let's say, to low well-being or feeling of insatisfaction in life is to be alone, so not have someone to count on. And you can see how much the structure of society that we have been into the urbanized Western is problematic, because we are generating loneliness in towns. And we are not providing conditions for the people to build network, to build social capital. So to be part of community, which is not necessarily the family, because the family is impacted in the structure in urban area, but is a network of connections that enable us to not feel alone in life. So that's the first question, or the second one, is can we keep patching this tissue, this fabric? Can we really deal with this issue just trying to adjust, not pieces and bones here and there? My answer is not. But, and I want to add one element. Do you know what this thing is? If someone knows, raising the hands. You all,
EaP formula?
Great. Is the word that you mostly listen every day. Is the formula of the mighty growth. So when you see a plus in front of number, which apparently tell you that things are going well, you know a plus that combination of things is growing. When you see minus, that means going down. But when you cut government spending there to go up, that means that either you're increasing the export and import, which is what has been doing Germany, by the way, and increase private consumption. And then you see how the inequality curves run up. And on top of that, I think I want to let you listen consideration on the GDP that we were spoken in March '68.
Too much and for too long, we seem to have surrendered personal excellence and community values in the mere accumulation of material things. Our gross national product now is over $800 million a year. But that gross national product, if we judge the United States of America by that gross national product counts air pollution and cigarette advertising, and ambulance to clear our highways of carnage. It counts special blocks for our doors and the jails for the people who break them. It counts the destruction of the redwoods and the loss of our natural wonders in chaotic sprawl. It counts napalm, integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. And it can tell us everything about America, except why we are proud that we are American.
Not bad, no? And it was 68. So, growth tells us very few things. Though is still the magic word. And if you look at European strategy, Euro 2020, which is the umbrella strategy for European Union, where, by the way, the word culture is not even mentioned once. This is a strategy for inclusive, smart, and sustainable growth. It's about economy. And still a mentality of patching things. We need to go beyond. We need to work with all the means we have to build a new model society in aging society, where the ethics and social innovation come first. Because the social pattern that we have built before worked no longer with new conditions. Do we have some assets? Oh yes. We have tremendous assets. We do not make great use of them, or not enough use of them. We can empower citizen sovereignty. And we can do it by connecting two factors which are peculiar of Europe. Is the centralized government. So that means that we take decision at level of local authority, which is closer to the people. And the fact that we've been developing a wide civil society. Because that's the way where we can bring again together people and institutions in order to change our way of living. And the decisions taken at urban level are those decisions that mostly immediately transform the way of living of us. Imagine how would you think a transplantation system if instead of simply looking at the speed of the mobility, you would start looking at the quality of the experience that people do while moving. Because the quality of experience that people do is a precondition to generate social patterns. And the way you shape social services, the way you consider the cultural institution roles in society, the way you invent and support civil society to come into this process. This is very much at the level of local and regional authority. There are laws, depending on the countries, that change, but we have these assets. And this is assets on which we should build our future. Then we have something magnificent, fantastic. We have invented, in this part of the world, the first attempt in human history to building a common sovereignty which is not resulting of the victory of someone else to another world. This is the European Union. It never happened in human history before. And if we don't understand that and we don't act in order to implement this, instead of implementing a national focused organization, we understand that there is a process of releasing control to sovereignty which is common, which is less identitarian, less nationalist, less name it. We waste something that our father maybe not have done because they were out of the Second World War. And they understood that the only way for this part of the world which has been, devastated by blood was to accept the only way ahead is to release control. And then we have another thing which is basically a result of 200 years of history and also of that good condition of control we had with the rest of the world. That we had built here intangible assets which we call democracy, we call education for all, we call it now environmental sensibility, we call it solidarity, freedom of expression, we call it rule of law, we call it a culture. An enormous part in our cultural institution, a culture which is the basis to build a new model of society in this part of the world, which is a society based on sustainability. We have these things, and we are risking to throw these things in the bin, because instead of imagining how we rebuild these things in a new condition, we try to protect it the way we have done it before. We need to move ahead. What has to be done? First, there's a concept. You know, the theory of sustainability is basically based on 3 pillars. So whenever you talk sustainability, it comes economic, environmental, social. There's another thing that has to be included in this thing. It is the cultural dimension. And what makes possible to build a sustainable society are the cultural capacities. So these are the elemental of what these elemental are. The experience we do foster the development of certain attitudes, certain capacities. And in order to build a society which is much more based on cooperation than in competition, that implies empathy, implies understanding, implies exchange, implies being on equal foot, we need to develop that kind of capacities. And that kind of capacities, as you see, are strongly influenced by cultural participation. Not only, but also strongly influenced by the understanding that every experience we have in daily life has a short or long-term impact on the generation of this attitude. And just if you think educational systems, we have been asking our educational system to create labor force which was capable to play a game where competition is core. What if the education system are targeted to different objectives, which is, by the way, generating that kind of capacity? And what would be the role of the art experience in the education system if the education system would have been targeted to that objective? It's very difficult today to advocate having arts, not arts education, arts in the education, because so we do it to try demonstrating that this is enable people to be not better competitor for the system. We don't need to do that. We need to demand the system to do different things. It's difficult, but there are elements in society that goes in the direction. Need to be put together. We can. It was a driver for the people living in that time. Surprisingly, we forgot. This is very origin of humankind. So, thinking, culture, in the end, is what enables us, I'm almost done, to read, give a meaning, transfer the perception of the world that we have. There's nothing in us which is not completely biological and culture. Think to birth or death, the most biological, natural things, and things what we have built around birth and death, in terms of rituals, in terms of processes, just namely, eating. That's not biological, it's not natural, and what we have done with that. So this is a driver. It is a driver if you understand this dimension of the culture, which is not just generating art. It's a wide, not meaning. So, getting to practical. There's one first thing. The first thing is that no longer cultural policy. No longer narrowly tied policy for the sector. The cultural policies might be part of a cultural development strategy, which impact a wide spectrum of policy fields. That's why we need to look the politic, the strategy, the overall directions, and the impact that different policies have on culture. If we look only at cultural policy in terms of what we demand the so-called cultural institution to do in society, we miss this part. And we miss the alliances that we can build on this approach. Because there are clear lines possible between the people working in the cultural sector, the one working in civil society on rights, the one working in education, just name that. Those that care of human development. But that implies for the people working in the cultural sector to step out from this kind of nice precinct where they think to be the best in the world just because they do the arts. Yeah, it's fine. But you're part of the world. And you have responsibility exactly because you're capable through the arts to transfer vision of the world at the level of the emotion and imagination, not at the level of rational thinking, which is a huge capacity. Well, no, it's an extraordinary capacity. But you must see it as an embedded component of your social function. It's not disconnected. And then the second thing, if we look at the way we have been thinking culture policy largely, we have been very much also ourselves producers, been very much looking at producing things, objects. What changes instead of producing objects or looking at the objects, we look at the experiences and how these experiences nurture the generation of social capital. Look, think of museums. I think of my country museums, which are both the worst in the world. It's a set of objects you have to go through. No, there's no way to go into, Pinacothèque and have a way to see that one thing that you want to do, have an experience. You have to go through everything. You always feel guilty because you couldn't see everything. It's impossible. There are a million of things. You don't know what to do. And things how a science museum is shaped. A science museum is when it's well, but normally it is shaped around the idea that you need to have an experience that enables you to learn, understand, be better outside. And that's a profound shift. If you start doing, by example, museums with this approach, then it completely changes the relationship between art and the art objects. And put that objects in our own life as an element which is contracted in our life. It's not something that we have adored. It's something that we have a relation with. And this is as well, when you do theory piece. There's a lot of experiences this way. But there's a shift, and a shift also implies additional competencies, which are not the competencies required to build a business, but a competency required to understand how a community reacts to what I am doing, are much more in sociological direction than in the direction of business and marketing classical. Cultural development implies to integrate the cultural development in the strategy, but also leads within a very interesting window. And he's trying to do what the environmentalists did 30 years ago, coming up with the environmental impact, with a cultural impact notion. So, what is the impact of urban strategy, or the way you shape squares, you put things on that kind of factors? Basically, what's the impact of policy which are not targeted to culture on the development of culture? On the development of the elementals which make each of us individually and collectively capable to be the citizens. This is a new field for exploration. We are working on this. It's very complicated, but I think this is a way ahead for us. It's the way we have to run on, is that we need to do on culture the very same things the environmentalists did on the environment. It's bringing from something which is interesting for the one that lives on to something is important for the general interest. But that implies things to us. Thinking, I leave this presentation to access anybody, so just it's clearly the common approach here. It's not copyright. There's, thinking beyond the birth and having a wider cultural perspective. Imagine that decision-making is participatory. And if participatory means community, it doesn't mean stakeholder. There is an holistic approach, which means that we start doing, policy, even at urban level. They bring in different administrative departments. You need to understand how things mix. Accept risking, which is thinking out of the box and imagine that you can fail. Empower the intermediaries. You need to transfer function from within the institution to the civil society, where people and institutions now actually can meet, and where you can build the basis for a democratic system. From object to experience, I was saying before, and cross borders. These are just a few elements. In short, we need to change. This is my plea. My plea is that if we change together, we can help them to catch meaningful life. We have things in hand. We must find a way to make use of them, to innovate, and to build connections which make the demands of the people that agree with this kind of approach strong enough to influence decision making. This is the challenge, and this is where you will find us as Culture Action Europe. Thank you very much.